Hi, my name is Sophie Bodner, and here with me today is my good friend, Kalin Gregory Davis. Kalin is currently working at the Doula Project in New York City, where she works as both a birth and abortion doula. And today, Kalin is going to talk to us a little bit about what a doula does, what the history is behind the word, and a little bit about her personal experiences. Kalin, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Sophie. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So, Kalin, can you talk to us a little bit about the word doula? What does it mean?
So the word doula actually has Greek origins. It comes from a word that actually means female helper. Typically, back in the day, the woman that would help clean the dishes, clean the house while the woman was in labor, this helper was referred to as the doula. And it was kind of reappropriated in the 80s, late 70s, first used by anthropologist Dana Raphael in her study of primates and the role that nursing really has, or the role that women's presence with the mother has in nursing in primates, actually. And so Dana Raphael was the first to refer to the name doula, and then it got kind of picked up in popular culture as the birth scene sort of started to change, and there was a move towards like coached childbirth, like husband coached childbirth, partners being present, and then also having an informed friend or a doula present during childbirth.
So in the modern day, it sort of moved away from essentializing the woman's role as a doula. So men can be a doula, or
men can definitely be a doula. Yeah, definitely. No, that was the origin of the word. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say maybe it's less common for men to be doulas, but in my own doula organization, there are plenty of doulas that don't identify as man or woman. And everything on that spectrum. So yeah, it's definitely moved away from it being like a woman's role. And I think that one of the biggest sort of shifts within the doula community is the need to shift away from that, because a lot in the natural childbirth realm is very gender essentialized. But that being said, now doula is really understood as an emotional support or advocate during childbirth, and in my work during abortion work as well. However, that is maybe a small fraction of what doulas do on the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, so, and how did you decide that you wanted to become a doula?
Well, I actually was working with midwives up here in New Hampshire, and an amazing midwife who I have a ton of respect for. One day we were sitting together at Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center, and I was talking about how I wanted to be a midwife and my career aspirations, and she told me that you learn the touch from being a doula. So midwives learn the technical skills, but you learn your touch from being a doula. And so immediately I was like, okay, I need to be a doula. That's what I need to do. So I found you go through certification, basically, I got certified through DONA, which is Doulas of North America. It's a certifying body. And I attended a 2-day intensive training. And then you have to document, like, as a doula for 3 births and write an essay and read some books. And it's kind of like a lengthy process. I haven't totally completed it, by the way. I'm like in training. But I did attend the training session.
In the past, you've recorded your stories through writing. Have you done that now that you're working as an abortion doula? Have you recorded any of these stories?
Yeah, actually, when I was in undergrad at Barnard College, I did a program called Centennial Scholars, and my 3-year-long project that was funded by Barnard College was to write birth stories. And so that's when I did some traveling, and I went to Mali, I went to Chile, I worked with a midwife in Harlem, and I kind of compiled different stories. I wrote 3, one from the United States, Mali, and Chile. And I was going through the whole process and thinking about, like, why was I writing? Why did I feel the need to share? And really getting into this idea of, like, bearing witness. And I called the presentation Bearing Witness to Birth. And so it's just this idea that, like, I've been given this, like, amazing opportunity to enter into the space of these people that are going through these like very vulnerable transitions of like childbirth. It's this huge life event. And so it's the notion of like really bearing witness to that, and like what does it mean? Like what does my presence mean, both, you know, on the scene, but also within myself and in my own career. And just really like giving voice to that fact. Like I was there, it's very much within me, and therefore I wanted to share like my subjective perspective. Like I was really focusing on the idea that like I'm not describing the scene necessarily like as it was for the person who was giving birth, because I can never know what that felt like, but I was diving into this idea of like, what can I offer to this? Like, what did I see, and therefore, how can I describe my experiences? And in doing all of that, I was also working as a abortion doula. And so it was funny because I was also thinking about how, like, you know, it's so common for people to tell their birth stories. Everyone wants to talk about, oh, you know, I was in labor for 2 days, and like, you know, the whole story spills out from there, and it's like this very common thing. And I was realizing more and more how much like the abortion story is never told. It's like a totally different social climate when it comes to abortion. And even within myself, as a birth and abortion doula, here I was telling all my birth stories and keeping totally silent about my abortion stories. And I realized that I was being like exhibit A, like I was letting that like societal pressure totally affect me to keep the abortion side silent. And so I totally redid my project. Like 2 days before I was supposed to pass it in, I was like, I need an abortion story. And so I had one abortion story that was sort of this like surprise at the end of the presentation, because the presentation was called Bearing Witness to Birth. And then at the very end, I kind of gave a similar speech to what I'm giving right now, and threw in an abortion story. And I found that to be like probably the most powerful part of the whole presentation. It really flipped the whole focus, because it went into what stories are we keeping silent and what stories need to be told, and like the power that comes with telling those stories that maybe are so often kept silent. And it turned into a totally different presentation, but I think a much stronger one, because abortion stuff is really hard, especially in our political climate, and I think it's incredibly important for these stories to be brought to light as well.
And so now you're working full-time as both a birth and abortion doula with
Yes.
the Doula Project.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell me a little bit about the mission of the Doula Project?
Yeah, so the Doula Project started in 2007, 2008, and it was really started as an abortion doula project. So basically they went into a few clinics in New York City, and they would sit with women during abortion. So in New York City, a lot of these clinics, in the actual procedure room, you can't have anyone from your life in the room with you. It's really just medical personnel, and that's for like many, many reasons. First of all, space, whatever. But what was really amazing about the Doula Project is that they really stepped in and realized that there's something incredible about an emotional advocate being there. So someone who's like totally unconnected to like the medical realm. Like when I walk in there as an abortion doula, I don't have to think about blood pressure. I don't have to think about the anesthesia. Like just none of that is in my realm. Like my entire focus is on the person who's having the procedure. And so the Doula Project, that was really their mission, was first and foremost, was abortion work, which was totally radical and new in the doula community. I mean, support during abortions is not something that is radical, and the Doula Project can't claim that. So that's been going on forever. But, I mean, not to mention a lot of the nurses, I would say, have offered doula support in the past. But putting the name doula on that kind of support was really radical, because previously doula had been entirely within the birth realm, and very connected as well to the natural birth movement, which in a lot of ways is aligned with, you know, abortion rights, but as you can understand, I mean, sometimes they're not hand in hand. And I think a lot of where the Doula Project was coming from is sort of a recognition that maybe there was a little bit of opposition between, like, you know, reproductive rights activists, you know, AKA abortion activists, and then the natural birth community, and like how they were sort of at odds. And some of the doulas tell this amazing story of going to like a reproductive rights conference and just seeing this really come out and hearing abortion referred to as murder by like a midwife, you know, things like that, that was just clear that there was like a lot of tension between these two activist communities. And so bringing the term doula into the abortion realm was this like really radical move, in my opinion. And so that really began with the Doula Project of New York City, and it has since spread nationally. So the Doula Project does trainings all across the country. There are abortion doula trainings, abortion doula groups all over the country. We've also been training medical students, which I think is really radical, because these are the people that are going to be providing abortions like later on as a doctor. And so to give them the tools to like provide emotional support, and even just to realize that emotional support is something that is important, is so radical. And hopefully maybe in their practice someday they will have doulas, you know, and so I think that's a really key element. But another really important mission of the Doula Project is providing doula services to low-income people, because typically, you know, doulas, especially in New York City, I mean, they can charge up to $2,000 a birth. It's like a very pricey thing. Like, I could be making money. Like, people live off this, which is awesome. Like, I think they should. It's amazing work, and it definitely deserves to be paid. But it often comes out of the pocket of clients. So, of course, that means that often only very privileged women can have doula services. And a big part of the Doula Project's thinking is like, that's not fair. It's not fair that only, you know, well-off women should be able to be supported, when sometimes maybe it's women who aren't as, you know, financially stable or, you know, socioeconomically well-off that really need the support. And so through that lens, I think it kind of spread into the birth world too, because all of a sudden we started realizing like, okay, we're providing like free services for women during abortion, but there are women who are giving birth unsupported because they can't afford a doula. So we now have a volunteer birth doula program too, which started after the abortion stuff, but we continue both now. And that is women that make less than $30,000 a year can qualify for our services. And so that's just a piece of what the Doula Project does. But that's another big aspect of the mission.
Wonderful. And what are some of the challenges that you face being an abortion doula? I think personally, New York City is a relatively welcoming atmosphere in terms of abortion. I mean, I'm speaking relatively. You know, we're not in, New York City is a pretty progressive state overall, right? So the abortion climate, I find, I haven't personally run into any sort of issues that providers or support people elsewhere in the country might run into. What I find to be the hardest thing is really dealing with this idea of, we have, you know, 60 plus volunteer doulas, and just the notion of being a volunteer implies you're coming from a certain socioeconomic status, that you even have the ability to be able to volunteer. Means that you are financially stable enough to volunteer your time. And so I think a lot of our doulas are like myself, you know, in their 20s, from relatively privileged backgrounds, you know, maybe aren't like rolling in it right now, but, you know, have, like, the world is at their fingertips, right? And are choosing to do this work out of like a mission, a sense of social justice, a sense of wanting to fight for, you know, reproductive rights and all of that. And then we're working with women that are just, I mean, under $30,000 a year in New York City. Like, it can be really tough in that respect. I mean, they don't have the world at their fingertips. I mean, maybe some of them do, but I would say vast majority are coming from like a very different like socioeconomic background. And so that is one of the toughest points for me, is just sort of like learning how to connect and be present, even having had such like vastly different life experiences. And maybe it almost maybe sounds like it should be simple, or it shouldn't be as hard, but I would say that like that's the number one thing that I find myself really focusing on and really trying to be present through, and it's also the most rewarding.
it's just the realization that, like, as humans, like, we can come together and we can work through something, and, like, I can provide something for them and they can provide something for me, and we might be, like, vastly different people from very different cultures, but, like, that interaction just, like, brings us together in some way, and I think that that's the number one thing that I've learned from this experience is, like, how to really make myself present to people that have lived a very different life from me. And but yeah, it's something that I'm constantly negotiating, you know, because you walk in and, like, I had a woman the other day in clinic, and she was asking me where I lived, and I just moved to Bushwick. And she just looks at me and she's like, wow, like, people like you are moving to Bushwick these days, you know? And because Bushwick is this very kind of, like, hip and trendy. It's kind of hipster to move to Bushwick, and it's really changing. It's totally getting gentrified and all of that. And I just share that story as an example. And it was nothing, like, malicious about it or whatever. It was just, like, those are the dynamics. Like, this woman had been born and raised in, like, Bushwick, Williamsburg area, and had watched this part of New York just, like, totally change. And then here I am, you know, 23, from New Hampshire, like, college educated, like, whatever, moving there by choice. And she just looked at me like, why would you want to live in Bushwick? You know, and it's just, like, it's stuff like that where, like, you just realize, like, a very different life experience is sort of going on. And I know that the Doula Project has really had to think and work with that. And it's hard because, like, the volunteer nature of the work, like, kind of requires that people be able to volunteer. And the Doula Project loves to have, like, previous clients become doulas. Like, that's a really amazing sort of transition, relationship, whatever. And so we're trying to encourage that and trying to branch out. We don't want to become this organization. Like, we want to be of the people for the people is the idea, but we're not necessarily coming from the same background as our clients. And so we're trying to sort of, like, morph that and talk about relationships of, like, you know, power dynamics, like race, class, and gender, all of these like, vectors that are intersecting that are informing our work and making, we don't want to become an organization that is, like, politically bent on our own ideas that maybe aren't the, you know, political views or initiatives of our clients. Like, we wouldn't want to, we want to be acting in a way that our clients need us to be acting, but sometimes that can be hard coming from different backgrounds.
So does the Doula Project sort of identify as a feminist organization?
Yeah, I would say it's very much like third wave feminists in action. So that's sort of moving into the realm of just like post-structuralist, post-modern, whatever. And it's really trying to break down, you know, the gender binaries. It's trying to look at intersectionality of race, class, and gender, how these all these influences are affecting reproductive choice. So I would say that it identifies as a feminist organization, yes. And the Doula Project is also very intent on, I mean, we say we provide pregnant people with services, trying not to gender. I've slipped up myself in this interview already. It's hard to get out of using the word woman, especially when a lot of my clients identify as women. But the Doula Project as an organization would not refer to the clients as women. So there's that piece of it. It's also definitely trying to, just given that it's working with, you know, lower socioeconomic status, it's definitely dealing with issues of race and class in New York City as well. So it's really at the forefront of race, class, and gender issues within reproductive health. And I would say it's activism on the ground, for sure.
And is there any program like this in the Upper Valley that you know of?
Upper Valley, I don't know of any. I don't think there's abortion doulas like this. there's probably people that are supporting emotionally during abortions, but I am not aware of abortion doula, calling it a doula. I do know people serve as doulas in the Upper Valley, or at least I assume so, given that I know at DHMC they see some doulas come through with laboring clients. So I think that's that. I don't know. But if I was around, I would love to look into it more in the Upper Valley. Or I was here for a couple months, and I was wanting to look into some abortion clinics in the area, but I didn't manage to. But I think that would be a really awesome thing for the Upper Valley.
Well, Kalin, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.